Welcome to this episode of Love is a Life in Entertainment and Media. Today I am interviewing Ryan Carter. Now, Ryan is a photojournalist and a visual storyteller. Good morning to you. It's morning in Australia, but it's 10:30 at night here. How are you doing?
Good morning, Paul. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm doing really well. Like you said, morning here. It's a nice morning, nice and warm. And yeah, it's a good way to start the day with a good conversation.
Brilliant. Well, where did it all start for you and how did you get involved in photojournalism?
So I guess for me, it began, I've done a lot of travel, a lot of aid sort of work, missions work. And I actually went to Russia back when I was 18, out of school, and went off as a missionary actually to Russia. And during that time, of course, the world was so different. Everything is so different to what I'd experienced growing up in Australia. You know, growing up in a small country town. I grew up in a town of about 200 people, a little place. Everyone will laugh at this, but it's called Cobdogla. It's
Wow,
a bit of a mouthful. Cobdogla, tiny little place. One of those you blink when you're driving and you miss it as you drive through it. And I wanted to experience more of the world and got out, and about the furthest place from home I could think of, something really interesting, really different, was Russia. So I started off my journey there and just was coming across so many different interesting things that people back home would have no idea about, like just the culture, the places, the people, the sights, the sounds, the smells, just everything. And just trying to work out, how do I communicate what I'm experiencing, what I'm seeing with my family back home, with my friends back home, with just the wider world out there. That, and this was back in about 2000, I think, 2001. So, internet was still, like, my family wasn't much on it, and it's still dial up and all that kind of thing. Yep. So trying to communicate these stories, and it sort of just grew from there, Paul, to be honest. And got my first camera while I was actually overseas. My granddad died, and I couldn't get back for the funeral, and it was about 9 months later when I finally got back to Australia. And for some reason, the family had, given off different bits and pieces of what he had and stuff, and they'd left me this old film Canon camera with a couple of lenses. And I thought, well, okay, I've got this now. I may as well teach myself how to use it. And went back on my travels with this old film camera and started visually capturing those interesting stories, interesting things I was seeing. And it's sort of grown from there.
Very cool. Was that the first time that you'd left Australia when you went to Russia?
No, I'd done a little bit of stuff previously with my parents as well. So I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents did some missions work in Indonesia and in Bali and in and around that sort of area. So I'd done that as a child. I was only sort of 9 or 10 or something at that stage. So it was still, I was young. It was just an adventure for me at that.
Yeah.
It was just new place, new culture, new things, and I loved it. I guess that sort of put a bit of that interest for the outside world in me, because unlike Europe where everything's so close, Australia, to get to another culture, it's it's a big deal. It's a long way. It's a big flight. It's a lot of expense. So that was really my only opportunity to experience, was to make that decision to up and go.
That's fascinating. When you went to Russia, whereabouts did you go to?
So I was based in Rostov-na-Donu, which is southern Russia, which, now with the conflict in Ukraine, that's kind of where it all sort of, primarily is based, down in that sort of areas, down southern Russia, down by the border. So that was kind of my base area. And then from there, I would sort of travel out to wherever, doing a lot of, because it was sort of missions and humanitarian sort of aid work, a lot of stuff with rehab centers, orphanages, different church groups, different, you name it, wherever we could get involved somehow with helping society. That's kind of what we were doing.
That is so cool. How big is faith in your life now? Is it still a major part?
It's still definitely a big part of who I am, and a big part of why I do what I do, I guess, is just having that understanding of I am privileged, blessed, lucky, whatever you want to call it, to have been born in Australia, and then to be able to travel the world like I do and get to see people who, just because of being born in, say, Congo, or being born in the mountains of Nepal, or wherever that is, their life is extremely different to mine. And just being able to, I guess, have empathy in that way. And a lot of my faith upbringing has sort of led to that sort of understanding of trying to help other people and trying to just be there for people and have empathy for people, and share love, and that no one deserves a lot of the horrendous stuff going on in the world today. No one deserves that, and if what I can do can bring light to some of that and can help alleviate some of that, provide more support, more aid, more services, more knowledge of even what's going on, then that can ultimately help other people out of those situations. And I guess that's kind of my heart behind what I do.
Absolutely. When you went to Russia, what was that like? Because there's still, there's the haves and have-nots in Russia. How bad was that at that particular time?
Oh, it was extreme for sure. Like it was, I was very young. I was 18. I was very naive. I didn't speak a word of Russian. So I flew into the airport in Moscow and had to switch airports and had no idea what I was doing. It was just a almost traumatic experience. I had a great team of people I worked with. There were some Russians and other people from over that, Eastern Europe, so Ukrainians and Uzbekistanis, and then also Americans, Canadians. I think there was a couple of UK as well, and Germans. So it was quite an international group of people. So there was a good support base around me. But definitely, as you walk through the city, like here in Australia, you have your neighborhoods where this is an affluent neighborhood and this is a poor neighborhood. Yeah. In Russia, it was house to house. Like you get this huge mansion, and they call it Novy Ruski, so a new Russian. And so it'd just be gigantic, this mansion, and right next door just be this people living in utter poverty. And these people would be driving in their Mercedes and their BMWs and stuff, and next door these people were struggling to even survive. And it's not a neighborhood or an area, it's just house by house. And to see that split, it really shocked me, that how someone can live like that while looking down every day. Whenever you come in and out, you're seeing someone who's struggling just to make ends meet, and you're not doing anything about that. That was just quite a shock to me. Social services were so not non-existent, really.
Yeah.
You get old ladies selling rotten bananas because that's all they had to sell, and their pension doesn't cover anything, so they needed to sell what they could sell.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been to Russia, and you're absolutely right. What I did find is that most people could work, and obviously they weren't earning a lot of money, but they would be working, in museums or what have you. When you arrived there, how were you received by the Russians? I mean, you're Australian. I can't imagine they get to see many Australians in that part of Russia.
No, well, no one knew where I was from. Even I'd have to say Australia, and they were Australia, and I have to mimic a kangaroo or something to get anyone to have any kind of example of where I'm from. But I found it a very interesting place in the way that quite cold and shut off initially. Once you get to know people, they're pretty friendly.
Yeah.
But the initial, there's a mistrust or it was an interesting experience for me trying to, I'm not a super extroverted person anyway, so I'm quite introverted in my personality. So trying to find some connections with people where I'm not a very strong person at trying to connect with people was a challenge. So I was very thankful for the people I had around me, because they were very supportive and very warm and welcoming in that way. So that made for an interesting time.
But you mentioned earlier about the places that you have been to as well, the additional places, the DRC, Nepal, Ukraine. How did you get involved in going there to tell their stories? Because I've seen your work and it's absolutely fantastic, your website, and I'll put that on the podcast. But your work is extraordinary. But what drew you to these places, and how do you feel you've told the stories there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a lot of it has come through relationships. So, just having got to know people who are doing extraordinary things. I guess for me, when I took that step from just having a camera with me to actually outwardly going searching for stories, and to do that came with my first trip to DRC back in 2014. So I'd met a friend. We were living in Sweden at the time,
Right.
and I had a Congolese guy. He was based in Germany, and he was also living where we were at in Sweden. And I heard his story, and his name's Pappy, and I've worked with him quite a lot now. But his story of, he was 10 when he was one of the militia groups was trying to recruit him as a child soldier. He escaped out of that and spent 2 years. His parents packed him up with whatever they had and said, you need to leave, because for them, this 10-year-old leaving the country alone by himself was safer than staying in the country.
Wow.
And he spent two and a half years walking from Congo, Eastern Congo, down to South Africa. And then his story is just an epic story of survival and, just everything that's gone on, and lived on the streets in South Africa. And his story goes on. Won't go too much deeper into that, but heard his story, and has an NGO now called Focus Congo, based in Germany and also in Congo, in Eastern Congo, which at the moment it's quite a troubling area of the world. And he invited me. He said, you should come with me, because he also does a lot of video work. So he's a sort of videographer, storyteller. We complement each other, had a lot in common. And I'd never been to Africa at that stage. And he's like, come to Congo. So, all right. And it's kind of the first time in that sense I went purely as a photographer, alongside him and his organization, Focus Congo, to share the stories of their work, to show what's going on. Before I'd met Pappy, I didn't even know where Congo was, let alone the situation in there, and the history of pain and problems that Congo's had. And then to hear from someone who's so, this is his life, this is who he is, he's Congolese, and to hear these stories, it's like, wow, the world needs to know this stuff. And then just to go and be able to sit with people and hear both stories of tremendous heartache and pain and torture and war basically, and hear these stories firsthand, while also hearing the stories of resilience, of strength, of beauty, of people still fighting and surviving and thriving in a country that has just had every bad hand thrown at it you could possibly imagine. And that really kind of accentuated where I wanted to be as a storyteller and photographer for me as well. I know you sort of introduced me as a photojournalist. I wouldn't call myself so much a photojournalist as much as more of a storyteller.
Right.
Journalism isn't my thing. A lot of what I do basically is revolving around humanitarian work and telling stories of people, and always trying to be a positive voice in the world. Where I know journalism can often get quite heavy and quite negative, and it's something I don't want to go to Congo and tell another story of another raped woman. Or another child soldier. That's not what my purpose is. And I don't think that the world's kind of over that. They're sick of that. They're tired of that. And it doesn't bring anyone empathy or anyone a connection to the place or the people. So it's something I really early on decided I want to go to these places. And yes, I'll tell the story of a child soldier, but that's not all he is. What's he doing now? Where are they now? What's their future look like? And how have they got through their issues or their trials and their struggles to create something healthy and create something good? And once I started telling and hearing these stories, it really made sense that this is what the world needs to hear. Yes, Congo is a huge problem, and there's so many issues in there right now that it's very easy just to overlook it and say, this is too hard and this is too complex. But when you can tell a story of one person, you can tell a story of this person who's come out of despair and found hope and has a future, and they've started through whatever program, through whether it's their own strength or other people coming around them and helping them. Once we can share that, people can connect with that and think, oh, I can actually make a difference. One life, one person, one organization, this can actually change lives. And this is where I can impact a situation it's a huge situation, very complex situation, which is very hard to understand, but when you can understand, you can change one person's life, people can get involved. And I think that's the power of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. What I find really disturbing is the level of violence in the DRC and other parts of Africa, but it's almost second nature. You talked about the child soldiers, but the fact is that killing is everyday norm. It's not something that, we're quite we're disgusted by it, we're disturbed by these things, but that is an everyday occurrence, which is really sad. Did you ever witness anything of that nature out there? And
not firsthand. We, not being a photojournalist, that was not the sort of the intention of my trip. So we would try and stay away from areas where there was unrest and issues. So it's talking to people. Of course, in Congo, it's not like, say, the war in Ukraine at the moment, where there's a very clear front line. You know where the enemy is. You know who the enemy is. Congo is not like that. It's still society living, and there's so many different militia guerrilla groups involved and then you throw in the tribal side of things, where this tribe offended my tribe 300 years ago, so we're still doing retribution killings and kidnappings or whatever from there. So there's such a depth of, like you said, of violence in there, and you hear stories that should absolutely shock the world, and this is every single person has a story like that.
Yeah.
If it hasn't happened to them personally, it's happened to a very close friend or family member. Every single person, especially in Eastern Congo, has a story of trauma and violence that is just shocking.
Yeah, absolutely. The sights and smells of Africa differ considerably to those in Adelaide and Sweden and what have you.
Yeah.
What was that like, the atmosphere of going into this part of the world?
Yeah. Like I said, like my Congo trip, that was my first time in Africa. So it was not only the issues and problems going on there, but like you said, like just culturally, just immensely different. Everything was just, I'm a very visual person. So everything around me, I'm just constantly looking, because there's just so many people. There's these sounds and sights, and like I said, smells. Everything is impacting all your senses at a level that we don't get here. Or at least we're used to here. So you get the normal sight smells that you've learned to look over, and you don't see them anymore. But then when everything is so tremendously different, I would get to the end of the day and be mentally exhausted. And a lot of that is just due to the visual nature of everything going on around me, and wanting to, part of me wanting to see and capture and tell every story going on, because it was so vivid to me. It was so just fully immersive. And whether you're sitting in the car or you're sitting at home, everything is just always there. And that was quite a challenge, a good challenge. I loved it, but definitely.
But you were probably, for a lot of people from the Congo, the first white person they'd seen, other than on television.
Yeah, I found that remarkable and quite an honor, actually, in some ways, when you head out of the cities into a village. And especially in Congo, if they saw a white person, they were in some aid labeled white Toyota SUV. That's what they do. They drive around in their convoys, maybe talk to the chiefs of the village or something, do whatever programs they do, and go home. We were taking normal transport and public buses, and sitting and talking to people and playing with the kids. And when you get kids coming up to you and touching you because of your skin, like they're just amazed at this skin and your hair, and it's so interesting. And you'd walk out and get this crowd of kids following you, white boy, white boy, white boy, yelling out, and they're laughing, and just like this sense of amazement on their faces as you're walking through a village. And yeah, you definitely can't go incognito.
How long did you spend out there?
So I've been there quite a few times. My first trip was about a month, and I've been back there, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 times now.
Really?
So I've done quite a lot of sort of ongoing work, both in Eastern Congo and over in Kinshasa in the capital as well. So I was back there actually just in November, December last year.
How do you get funded for this? I mean, it's amazing work that you do, and as I say, your work is extraordinary. But how do you get funded?
That's always a challenge, Paul, right? When you're a freelance photographer.
Yeah.
Thankfully, a lot of the work I do now is based with an aid or a humanitarian organization or group, because I'm coming in telling their stories. Often they'll pay. So like this last trip in Congo I worked with 3 different organizations. So that way the costs of getting me there and everything gets split between 3 organizations, right, making it a bit more affordable for everyone. And, when you sit down and talk with people and they can see the value of good communication, of good storytelling, like they're doing good work, but their staff are so overworked. Their staff have extraordinary skills. Communication, photography, storytelling isn't one of them. And when you're dealing with, say, malnourished children, storytelling doesn't need to be your skill set. You need to know how to deal with that at that time.
Yeah.
So when I can come in and support that through storytelling, take that burden off of their staff, their local staff or their international staff, and come in and create a gallery of images and a whole collection of stories that can communicate, firstly, what they're doing, and the people who are involved in their programs and their staff, but also the needs and the success stories. And you can put together a whole communications package for an organization, which they can then use across social media. They can use for annual reports and all different kinds of reporting to sponsors and donors and for recruitment and things like that. It makes sense for them to bring someone in to do that. So thankfully, I'm at that stage now where generally I get paid by the organizations to come in and tell their stories.
Very cool.
In the past, it has been, out of my own pocket at times, and different organizations have different budgets and stuff. So some will cover expenses, but that's it. It really just depends on the organization and also how closely I feel connected to the stories and to the needs, where I feel like I can, of course I'm trying to provide for my family and run a business, but also the work that we're doing is important. So there's often times that I'll sort of donate time and do pro bono work, just because I see a need and the value in what I do, and if that can help people, then I'm happy to do that.
But there's only so many times you can speculate to accumulate. That's the
exactly.
That's the main thing.
And I think in that way it comes along. It's a donation, right? Like,
yeah,
a lot of people donated their work to whatever fund or whatever organization they feel is doing good work, and I don't have a whole lot of spare cash to donate financially to that, but if what I can donate is pictures and stories, and I feel it's a good way to give back to people who are doing good work and people who really need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, your website, we'll be putting that on the body of the text.
Thanks.
It's brilliant. The photographs on there, there's a great picture of somebody from the Aborigine. Is that local to you? Is that
Yeah, so it's Aboriginal elder here in Adelaide,
right.
In Ghana land, and a big part of the community here is smoking, welcome to country. So it's a smoking ceremony, welcome to country, and it's done before a lot of big events or meetings or activities like that, where someone will come in. And it's basically just welcoming everyone, this acknowledging the fact that this is traditional Aboriginal land that we're on, and just welcoming us to that, to understand the history of the land that we're on and the depth of that and what that means for Aboriginal people, and to be welcomed into that space. So I've got to work with quite a few Indigenous people here in that way, and photograph some of the elders doing those welcome to country ceremonies. Is it's a beautiful moment to be able to, quite intimate actually, to be able to photograph that.
Yeah, no, so that's one that really sort of stands out. But they're all very, very good. Where did you go to after you've done the DRC? Because you've been to Nepal, you've been to Ukraine. What was this?
Well, it's kind of a bit everywhere, because a lot of my work is shorter term. It's like from 1 week to 6 weeks, and it can be in different places. So we're now like based back here in Australia, but that first trip to DRC, I was based in Sweden at that point.
Yeah.
After Sweden, as a family, so wife, two kids, we moved to Ukraine. So we moved to Ukraine in 2016.
You actually moved to Ukraine?
Yeah. So we lived in Western Ukraine in the city of Ternopil for about 5 years, just over 5 years,
right.
From 2016. So we left about 6 months before the full-scale invasion happened.
Right.
We left because of COVID, actually, being that most of our income came through my work, which was travel-based, and COVID had put a big hit on any sort of travel and any kind of interacting with humans, which as a photographer who tells human stories, that's not great for business.
No.
So we had to make a change, and so we came back to Australia at that point, because just financially nothing was left. And then 6 months later the war kicked off in Ukraine, and we were back here. So we've kind of had a lot of different bases, Paul, and been sort of around and then gone off on trips depending on where the needs and opportunities were. So it's kind of a bit of the story.
But you've been back since the war started. You've been back, haven't you? You've gone and covered, if I've read it correctly, you've been to the front line.
Not quite, not to the zero line.
Right.
So last year in June, I started off in Nipro and working with an organisation called Children New Generation, and they're an organisation, they're dealing with a lot of food distribution, partner with the World Health Organization, or World Food Program, one of the, probably both.
Yeah.
But going into areas either liberated or right near the front line. So we were went into the Donetsk region there, around Poltava. We actually went in their main base hub at that time was in Poltava.
Yeah.
Not Poltava, sorry, Pokrovsk. which now is one of the epicenter areas. And a lot of those villages around there, Selidova and Ukransk and places like that, they're now occupied. So we were delivering food and stuff at that time to the people living there. And since then, that's now been occupied. So then they also work with evacuations and evacuating civilians from frontline areas and stuff. So yeah, helping to tell their stories. Once again, the same thing that I do. For me, Ukraine is a very personal conflict in the way that we live there. You know, my children grew up there. So my youngest was about 3 when we moved there, and my eldest was 6 and went through the first 3 or 4 years of her schooling in Ukraine. She speaks fluent Ukrainian. We have very good friends, of course, still in Ukraine now. So it's not just this big war. This is also, you know, getting reports of people. I remember early days of the war, the first couple of weeks, actually our youngest daughter's nanny, Margot, she had left Kiev thinking it wasn't safe and went to her village, and her village was occupied. So she was living under occupation for those first almost month of the war. Initially, we were getting reports and stuff from her from her phone, and then everything went silent. And you know, of course, we're here in Australia trying to hear what's going on, and this is someone that a daughter spent every day with her for 18 months. Loved her dearly, and now she's just gone off the radar. And you know, people trying to get to her and work out what's going on. Are they still alive? Is it just, you know, they don't have phone access anymore? And so these sort of stories was hitting us daily for those first, you know, weeks of the war, and trying to work out what was going on. And I headed back there about 6 weeks in. It was my first trip back. It was start of April, I think I headed back, and just to, feeling like I have a skill set that can be helpful in sharing these stories and the needs and the actual, you know, so much misinformation around and so many people not knowing what's actually going on, and trying to share some of the stories of the people that I know who are struggling, but also the people that I know who are doing remarkable things, taking aid to the, you know, under siege areas and collecting things, sheltering people, looking after refugees. Like the amount of work going on at a grassroots level by individuals at that time was just phenomenal. And it was an amazing thing to be able to go and support them in that and tell some of those stories at that early stage.
And there are brilliant people I've interviewed, because I have another podcast which is all about police and military personnel. And I interviewed a chap a few weeks ago. He lives in Poland. He's English. He lives in Poland. He collects equipment from all over the UK and takes it to the front line in the Ukraine. Another chap who was in Canada, believe it or not, who did exactly the same thing. So, you know, it's one thing getting it from Poland or from the UK through Poland into Ukraine, but to get it from Canada,
it's a long way
to the Ukraine. And you know, and he was one of the drivers. He would meet the stuff there once it'd been shipped, and he would take it to the front line. And they were amazing people, and I'm disappointed at world politics at the moment, if I'm really honest with you. In fact, to a point, I don't even watch the news anymore.
It's very depressing, Paul, isn't it?
It is depressing, and I feel that people are being let down, if I'm honest with you, because there's a monetary piece around this, and there's just no justification for letting people down in the way that they are being let down. And I hope there's an end to it. But I the way I explain it, if somebody came to my house and decided they were going to take a piece of my garden, I wouldn't just say, well, there you go, you can help yourself. I would make sure that I fought to the death to protect what is rightfully mine.
Yep.
And
doesn't matter if you're bigger and stronger than me. Like, this is my place, and you have no right to it.
Exactly, and that's how I see it. And I know full well if Canada decided to invade the USA from the north and Mexico decided to do it from the south, America would defend that with all of their might.
Yep, 100%.
And that's it's a real shame.
It's just sad to see the world come to a place where strength is everything. Like morality, legality. There's nothing bigger. It just comes to whoever's biggest gets what they want, and that's a very, very dangerous slope to start going down. And that's the way I see it heading, and it's not good for anybody.
Well, it's like a bad Batman movie, to be perfectly honest with you.
It is. Yeah, for sure.
When were you last out in the Ukraine?
So June last year was my last trip. So putting together another trip for probably mid-year again this year. Talks with a couple of different organisations, some I've worked with before, and a couple of new ones hopefully. To same sort of thing. We actually work with it. We have a Ukrainian organisation here in Adelaide.
Right.
So our families are part of it. We do a lot of sort of the Ukrainian traditional cultural dances and performances and stuff just to create awareness, but also deliver a lot of medical supplies. So we get donations from our local St. John's ambulance and stuff, getting near expired or expired health and medical equipment and stuff, and we'll ship that back. And so a lot of our money we get performances and stuff goes into shipping stuff back across. We actually got a really big donation from Rotary at the start of this year for almost $30,000. So we're putting together a container of, once again, of just stuff that's needed on the front lines. And because everyone, like there's a lot of Ukrainians here who've both been here for a long time and also recent refugees. So there's a lot of contacts still in Ukraine. So we'll be getting that stuff there to organizations and people in hospitals who need this stuff. So it's kind of cool. And hopefully I'll be able to get back and tell some of that story when all this equipment and stuff gets over there. So,
well, if you've got any links that I can put into this podcast so that people can make their donations, please make sure that I've got them, and I will add them to the body of the text as well.
Wonderful. I'll do that for sure, Paul.
Fantastic.
Not a problem.
What was Nepal like? I mean, that's one place I mean, all these places I'd love to go to, but for different reasons. But Nepal, I would love to go there because I just think it's totally off the scale. I mean, we have Gurkhas. I live not far from a military town, so we have the Gurkhas and what have you. But what was that like?
Nepal's amazing. I've been there quite a few times. The first couple of trips was just in Kathmandu. I was working with a social business called Donati, and it's an organisation that they create hand knitted gloves, scarves, hats, things like that. So it's taking women, at-risk women who have nothing, and then teaching them to knit, and then they can knit this stuff and this gets sold on internationally around the world. It's coming against sort of the fast fashion, so it's slow fashion. It's creating a meaningful, well-made, quality, handmade piece. So I worked with them for a couple of years as they were a startup and as they were into it, developing further and further. And yeah, amazing. Kathmandu is just a huge, crazy city. Very, very interesting. Just beautiful, beautiful colors, beautiful people. Yeah, really spectacular. So I really loved it. And just the setting. You're in the city, just surrounded by these mountains, and the views and stuff are just phenomenal. And then that actually led me to connections with another guy who ran an organization called The Uncommon Way, which is telling stories of people whose stories don't get out there. It's been a voice for the voiceless and helping share these stories. And with him, he'd organized, they were doing a trek up to Langtang. The Langtang trek is called, up Langtang Valley in the Himalayas. And asked me to come along and sort of document the trip. So I sort of went on a 10-day trek up into the Himalayas. Got up to about 15,000 meters. It was pretty intense, a lot of walking, but just spectacular. And to come to some of these little villages and these little huts and just places just in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and to be able to talk to people and see what's going on. This was not long after, maybe 2 years after the big earthquake happened back in 2015. So still, like, Langtang village was completely wiped off the map from that earthquake. So you walk across, now sort of being rebuilt next door, but there's just this landslide which has just covered a whole village that was several hundred people, just gone, nothing left. And then to see people sort of rebuilding their life right next door, like to this spot, very intense. But yeah, amazing people. Just a beautiful place and beautiful people, and the scenery. Getting into the Himalayas, it's just absolutely spectacular.
And they've got such a good heart as well.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
They really have.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep your kit going? I mean, if you're doing a trek for so many days, and how many batteries do you have to take, and what sort of cameras do you use?
So I use Nikon gear, or Nikon equipment. It's a lot of batteries. It's trying to conserve power where possible, keep things warm, like especially in Himalayas, it's getting to minus 20 overnight. So you're trying to keep batteries in your sleeping bag and keep batteries in your jacket. So, the cold just sucks anything out of the battery. So you're trying to keep everything as warm as you can. And then whenever you get the opportunity to charge, you make sure everything's charged up. So a lot of the guest houses have electricity of some kind at some level. So whenever overnight, if if possible, you get things done. I have a couple of decent power packs that I carry with me as well, which I can charge my batteries and stuff from. So primarily trying to keep those topped up all the time, and then from there my camera batteries on top of that. And it's just little things when you're away from power for a while, you're not using your review screen on your camera and stuff, you're turning all that stuff off, so you're taking pictures, you're not spending time scrolling through what you've already taken, and you're just trying to keep any sort of usage to the minimum. But yeah, it works. It's just a bit of forethought and trying to make sure that, because at the same stage you want to capture the pictures, right? There's no point having a camera if you're not using it. So it's always that mix between capturing the story and telling the story and making sure you have enough for tomorrow's story.
And how many lenses do you take with you?
It depends on the trip. Usually I try and travel with my primary lens would be a 24-70, which is just that great sort of gives you a wide enough view to be able to capture most things, even internal in rooms and stuff, and 70 is a decent length. I'm currently still with the old D850, which is a 40 megapixel camera. So even at that, if you need to zoom in and crop in afterwards, you've got quite a bit of room to play with.
Yeah.
So that's quite nice, especially most stuff these days is used online. So when you're using for social media and stuff like that, it's an overkill what I'm providing, but it gives you that opportunity to really crop into a place, a face, a view, and recompose afterwards because you've got so much data there to deal with. So that's a good thing. And that trip I took 70-200 along with me as well, which is a big heavy lens. But you're up in the Himalayas and things are beautiful and spectacular, but also distances are quite huge, so you're wanting to be able to compress the background where you can and bring some dynamic sort of views in. And it's at the end of the trip I kind of regretted the amount of gear I took, because my back and legs and everything was not very happy with me for a while, Paul. But once you start sitting and looking through the pictures, you kind of worth doing. And
absolutely. Do you edit everything yourself? Are you?
Yeah, 100%. It's a big part of what I do, actually. It's my style that I've created through my own editing. And I love that as well. Like, you sit down, you go back, and it gives you time to process and remember back through stories. And especially because I do write a lot of sort of captions or short-term content around the images itself. So when you're sitting down editing, you're sort of really focusing on that picture, that person, and it brings back things. You see little bits in the background and other little details. Like, you'll pull one photo out of a sequence of 20 photos that you've taken of a person, and each photo is slightly different and will tell kind of a different story. You share that one image, but as you're going through stuff, you're remembering all the different aspects of this and the way that person communicates and the way that person's emotions are and their facial features and their expressions that they're conveying to you. It's much broader than that one image. So as you're doing the editing process, you're going through that and finding these different expressions and different things, which is a beautiful process that I love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Time consuming, but I love it.
Oh, it is. Do you ever throw away any images? Do you ever delete any images?
No. I'll go through my initial cull when I get back. I'll go through, like, if I've accidentally pushed the button and taken a photo of my toe or something like that, or anything completely out of focus, I'll get rid of that stuff. Yeah. But otherwise, everything I keep.
Me too.
The amount of times I've gone back looking for something and found something that, it's even as the way I view things changes. I'll go back and look at photos, say I took in Congo in 2014, and compared to what I'm taking in Congo now, and I'll find something and think, wow, why wasn't this marked as one of my favorites back then? Like, this is a beautiful image, and I'll go back and re-edit and bring that to life again now, because just the way I see things and details and stuff is quite different. So I keep everything. Hard drives are not that expensive anymore, so I sort of just store everything and back everything up, and it's always there to pull from if and when I need it. Yeah,
I've got a huge stack of SD cards. I just, I've got hard drives. I've got SD cards. It's on the cloud.
Yep.
And they're relevant to me, and hopefully, if anything ever happens to me, my kids are going to sit down and say, "Oh, look at all these lovely photographs Dad took." I can't.
And you hope that they'll actually sit down and look through them, right?
Yeah, you'd like to think so, but I'm not really sure that they will. And most of them, I say most of them, but there's a lot of my grandchildren, and there's some quite random ones on there. But I just will not delete anything.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what I do, I just won't delete it.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you.
But you've done. I think I've read somewhere that you've done work around the water aid and making sure, covering that element of it. How do you feel when you walk away from these towns where they've got absolutely nothing, accepting that, you're not a photojournalist and you are telling their story? How do you feel as you get on that plane and you're leaving? Do you sort of reflect back on the people you've left behind?
Always, always. I think a big part of what makes my images hopefully powerful is an empathy that I have. Like, if I can't connect to a person when I'm right there talking with them, taking their photograph, I can't expect my photo to connect with someone else on the other side of the world. So a lot of what I like is putting my heart really into it, and investing in people, and being open and vulnerable myself is a huge part of what I do. So I think that's very key to creating beautiful imagery. Is the people, and I know we mentioned this very early on in our chat, that feeling of, I'm lucky, privileged to have been born in Australia, and depending where you are in the world, your life can be very extraordinarily different to mine. And
Yeah.
I think that's such a key part of what I go into this thinking, like, this isn't a person in need as such, as this is another human being, and I want to hear their story. I genuinely think that a person's story is the most valuable thing they own. The most valuable thing that someone has is their story. That can never be taken away from them, and that is their own unique thing. It's like a fingerprint, right? No one's story is the same, and that's such a valuable thing. And we need to, my job, it's a privilege, but there's a huge responsibility to listen to someone's story, take that story and share it in a genuine way that empowers the person whose story is being told. And it's such a deep thing, and really been ingrained in me now in this 10, 15 years I've been doing this, is to really show dignity in people, whatever their situation, wherever they are. If that photo isn't a way I would like to be shown in an image, it's not an image I'm going to show to people. So it's really trying to connect with people, and I think that also builds a trust and builds an ongoing connection. A lot of the organizations I work with on an ongoing basis. Every year, every couple of years, I'll go back and work with them again and tell more stories from the people and the places that they're working with. So it's trying to connect and just trying to be genuine and real. I think no one wants some pretentious jerk with a camera coming up and putting it in their face and saying, smile for this, do this, do that, do this. That's not who I am. It's not who I want to be, and I don't think it brings any value to the world around us. But if I can sit with someone and just genuinely hear their story, and it's not because I want to get a good photo, it's because I'm genuinely interested in their story. I'm genuinely interested in who this person is, what their life has been, what their life is right now, and where their life is headed. And these are really, really interesting to me, to hear someone's story. And I love that process of hearing a story and just hearing someone's life and getting to know them. And then if we can create an imagery around that, which also empowers them and brings more impact to that story, I think that's a beautiful thing, and it's a process that I love.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've seen the best in humanity, because people working together to make sure that communities thrive, and you've also seen the worst in humanity as well.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a part of working
sobering.
in places like DRC and Ukraine at the moment, is it's those extremes of humanity. It is the best and worst at the same time. And people dealing with the absolute horrors you couldn't ever wish on anyone, and at the same time coming together to create a community of caring, of love, of support that we could only dream of here in Australia. So it's extremes of humanity, and I think that's where the most powerful stories are.
Yeah, absolutely. What do your friends think? Because I mean, it's a very, I suppose it could be very dangerous. I mean, have you ever come into any danger?
Probably the most dangerous experience we had was in Congo. We're in a village in Congo, and they started questioning why there was a white guy with a big camera around, and they called through to some security service somewhere, and that we had to leave very rapidly, and it was a bit touch and go for a second. So my friend Pappy, who I work with, he was there as well, and of course he's Congolese and he knows the area and stuff. He got some phone calls from people, and he's the most light-hearted, happy, jovial guy you could imagine. And this is the first time I've really seen him concerned and serious, and that's when you start thinking, okay, this is
This is real.
This could be a problem. This is the real deal. So we need to go. So that was one. And being like in the middle of nowhere in Congo, like if something was to happen, you know, that would be it. There's no one coming to help you at that point. So that's a little, that's probably my riskiest place I've been. And I feel Congo is that because there's so many groups involved and so many things going that something can happen at any time.
Yeah.
My time in Ukraine, we were never on the zero line and that close to the front line. We were about 5 kilometers from the front line when we were in the sort of the Donetsk region, which is close enough where you're hearing explosions and stuff. But we had an airstrike hit about 200 meters from us at one point in Selidova. And that's intense when that happens. But you feel still there's this, where we were at least, unless it was a random airstrike or something like that to hit us, probably it's not that dangerous. I don't know, maybe that's just my optimism coming out, or doing what I need to do just to do my job. But my friends all think I'm a little crazy. I think some of them are a little jealous. People at work think I'm a bit nuts. Don't see why I would put myself willingly in a place that's potentially dangerous when I don't have to. But most people are pretty supportive of what I do. And I
do you do other work? I mean, you do other work in addition to the photography?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm working part-time with a local not-for-profit called Uniting Community. So it's a relatively large not-for-profit here, dealing across all social services from homelessness, drug, alcohol abuse, aged care, mental health. We have a whole range of services. So I work as a communications coordinator for them. Basically, it's telling stories. So I'm working with our services to share the stories of what's going on. So same thing I'm doing around the world, but I get to do it here when I'm not off on a trip. I'm still bringing in some money consistently here, which helps the family a lot.
And gets you on your next trip to
That's
wherever.
Right. And they're super supportive. So my work is when I took the job, it's like I wasn't really looking for a job, but the opportunity came up, and I said I still really do want to be doing this. This is what gives me life. This is what I really value, and they were very supportive on that and encouraged me to continue pursuing that while I'm working for them. So they let me go off. I'm off to Philippines in a month or so on a clean water project.
Oh wow!
And they're more than happy for me to head off and do that. So.
Yeah, because they've got a terrible problem out there with the plastics, haven't they, in the waters around the Philippines? It's a real shame. Oh, that'll be absolutely fascinating.
Thanks,
and the work
Paul.
the work that you do the work you do is brilliant. I'm actually envious, if I'm honest with you, because I'm massively into my photography, and I would love to. I mean, I spent 30 years as a cop, but I would love to do what you're doing, because I just think it's so valuable. It's so worthwhile, and it's to tell that story from the perspective of the persons that are involved in it. There's no glorification. It is what it is. It's the raw deal. Mm-hmm. Where do your images go? I mean, you've got a handful on your website, but I assume that the client will take them. What do they do with them?
So they all kinds of purposes, to be honest. Like social media now is a big thing. So it's building galleries of images for ongoing, to be active on social media now, an organization needs to be posting 3, 4, 5 times a week.
Yeah.
And to be, of course, I'm not in it. Say Congo, for example, I can create a gallery of images, but I can't tell that day-to-day story that's happening every day. But if I can create a solid collection of imagery with stories behind that, which they can post a couple of these a week, which tell the heart and the ethos and the values and the vision of an organization, then they've always got that substance, a quality substance around, which then they can get their own staff, even if it's a cell phone and the quality is not great or whatever, to tell a this happened today story. But that's surrounded by quality imagery and captivating imagery that really helps to communicate who and what and why the organization exists. So that's a big part right now. A lot of that as well, then every organization needs to justify where their funds are going. So either annual reports, financial reports, stuff like that. So a lot of it goes into those sort of needs as well, and put together for whatever it's donor communications. So a lot goes out in newsletters, monthly newsletters, whoever. So each organization has its different needs and stuff, but it goes right across from websites, yeah, or just worked with one they're redoing their website. So that was a big part of that, was to get the imagery that's going to tell each of the stories on all the pages throughout the website and communicate that. So it's quite broad. I will of course share some where I can across my own social media and things like that. I pull out a selection of them like that. But outside of that, that's primarily the uses is social media, both donor engagement, donor recruitment, general awareness. I think there's a lot of stuff now that's generally done through social media as well, but creating awareness of the needs and the programs available. So it's a bit of everything, to be honest, and something I'll always sit down with the organization before I start working with them. What's the purpose of this? Like, I don't want to just go and get pretty pictures for them to sit on a hard drive and no one to ever see. That's not helping me. It's not helping you. It's not a good use of your money, your team's resources, anything at all. So what's the end goal here? What are we trying to communicate with these pictures? And then how do we make that happen and try and get sort of a bit of a flow chart going before we even get there, so we know what images to get, what stories to tell, and how we can best communicate those, and the way to create those to create maximum impact, I guess, and a return on investment. It's not necessarily cheap to get someone like me to go out and work with an organization. So they want to make sure that they're actually getting a return on that, and it's making sense to hire me and bring me along.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do they commission you? I mean, do they find you online? Is it word of mouth? How do you get commission for your jobs?
A bit everywhere. So some has been through my website, through LinkedIn and Instagram. I've picked up quite a few jobs actually like that. And then now I'm finding a lot of it is word of mouth as well. So, an organization I've worked with, I'll be talking with, someone else doing similar work somewhere, and need comes up for a photographer or a storyteller, and they'll pass on my details like that. I also do a lot of like cold calling, emailing, connecting with people, just trying to build connections. And then once you're there, like say when I'm in Ukraine, I'll often be going to work with a single organization, but when you get there, you'll meet someone else, hear someone else. There's so much stuff going on, and you'll connect with them, maybe do a day here or a couple of days there, and that starts forming a relationship. And I happily that most of the time now when I produce some images for someone, they're pretty happy with them, and they like the quality and like the stories, and so then they'll come back to me when they have more needs or a bigger need or something else coming up. So word of mouth is the best way always, in selling, right? If someone can
absolutely
share a positive experience, because there's so many people out there who call themselves photographers as well, and different levels. I know there's a lot who are better than me, and there's a lot out there who aren't. So if an organization is going to spend a lot of money to get someone out on location, they want to know that he's going to be able to manage that, and it's not going to be someone there who doesn't know what he's doing and struggles in a situation which is slightly uncomfortable. And so it's something with my experience now, I can pretty much go into any situation in any country, any language, anywhere, and come out with the imagery that's going to tell those stories.
And it's made all the more easier because we no longer have to load a film into the back of a camera.
Exactly.
We can get more than 36 images. We can take more than 36 images in a minute if we want to.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And whereas before you'd be thinking, do I need to take that photograph? Whereas now it's just instantaneous. So that from that perspective, it's brilliant. But I'm with you. Most people wouldn't know how to set a camera up. They all use their phones.
Mm-hmm.
I use Sony equipment, and I've got a bridge camera, and I've got other cameras as well. And it's just because that's my passion. My wife goes mad because I mean, I'm sure you've probably got a hell of a lot more, but she goes mad because if I want a camera, then if anyone wants a camera, there's a camera on the desk. I even got my granddaughter who's 4. I got her a camera when she was about 2.5, so she could go around taking just the kids' camera. Yeah, but that's what you do, because that's how we capture our history.
And it's a beautiful thing to give a child that age. I remember doing that with my daughters as well, and seeing what's interesting to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
What they find fascinating and what they're capturing, because they see the world so differently to us.
Yeah,
and it's such a beautiful thing to see that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's perfect. But, well, look, I've had an absolutely brilliant time chatting to you. I hope that you've enjoyed it. We've been talking for an hour or so. And
oh my goodness, we have.
and it's
Fly
gone
by.
really quickly. And there's so many more things I could ask you, but I'm conscious of your times.
No
But
problems, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
thank you. Enjoy your trip to the Philippines, and please, please come back to me when you've done that. But I will be in touch with you soon anyway, because I just think that there's stuff that we could do. If you've got anybody that would talk to me, your friend from the DRC, anybody that's into photography or media or anything like that, please introduce me, because I'd love to get
Yeah,
their stories as well.
for sure. I think Pappy would be interested in. I know he's, because of all the issues in DRC right now as well. He's really just trying to create more awareness of the situation there, and I'm sure he'd love to share that. I'll have a think of anyone else as well.
That's lovely. Well, listen, your family must be very proud of what you do, because, as I say, your work is superb, and I wish you all the very best. And thank you so much for your time today, sir.
No worries, Paul. I appreciate it. I'm glad you reached out. It was very unexpected, and I don't even know how you actually connected with how you
I
found
think I
me.
saw something on LinkedIn, and I just thought,
Mhm.
do you know what? This chap's fascinating. The work that he's doing is absolutely brilliant, and I like. I like to talk. I think that's probably, and I think if you've got that way about you when it comes to photography, if you've got that common interest, it makes it so much easier to communicate. So I
For sure.
saw your post, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna speak to this chap. So thank you
I
so much for your
appreciate that.
time. And
No worries.
have you been to the UK?
Yeah, a couple of times. Got some good friends there actually. So
Brilliant.
if I'm
Well,
ever there, I'll pick you up and we'll grab a beer together.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Okay, because it's no good me saying, well,
Count on it.
when I go to Mission Beach, because Mission Beach is how many thousands of miles from Adelaide. So I can't even say I'm going to meet you for a beer in Mission Beach. But if you're coming to the
Yeah,
UK, I know that even if you're in Scotland, it's going to take me an hour to fly up there. So
we can make that work.
we
Yeah.
can make that one work. Yeah.
Either that, or next time I'm off to Ukraine, bring your camera along. You can come along with
Oh,
me. We'll do some
I would
pictures together.
absolutely. I would love that. Honestly, I would absolutely love that. That would be amazing. God bless you, mate. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your
You
time.
too. You too, Paul. Thank you.
Keep up the brilliant work, and
You too.
have a great day.
Thanks. Stay in touch, yeah?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. God bless you. Take care, mate.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Catch you.
Bye bye. Bye bye.